The first speaker of this session is Professor Raja Chatila, who is an emeritus professor at Sorbonne Université. He is the former director of the Intelligent Systems and Robotics Lab, Institute of Intelligent Systems and Robotics, almost, who is, which is very well known in France. ISIR is the short name. So Raja has contributed to many different topics in robotics, like navigation, SLAM, machine learning for robotics. He has more than 170 scientific contributions on the topic, I think. And he has also been involved in projects such as Human AI Net and AI for You. And I think one thing that is remarkable is that I think you are co-chairing the Responsible AI group of the Global Partnership in AI. So this, we are very happy to have you here, and thanks for accepting the invitation.
Thank you very much for having me. My term as co-chair of the Responsible AI Working Group has just ended by the end of 2023, so I'm just a citizen of the world. Okay, so today we have actually a series of talk in this session. It's not just one long talk. You have 3 different perspectives. And I would like to speak about ethically aligned design for social robotics. So what does this mean? Social robots, as you know, are built by definition to interact with people. This is why they are called social robots, and to do things for people. It's not just interaction, it's also doing useful things, possibly. Although a lot of them are just interacting, right? It's specifically, for example, robots which are conversational agents, which are considered as social robots anyway, although the word robots shouldn't apply, but they just interact. But what we have to really know, understand, and remember is that they do not understand anything about us, and they specifically do not understand our values. Some, of course, programming can be done to make them act in a way that looks like compliant or aligned with some of our values, but in all cases they don't understand what it's about. They are socio-technical objects, which means objects which are technology, but they have impact on society. And therefore, their design has to take this into account, has to consider that they have impacts on humans and the human individuals, human groups, and on society. They can have different conflicting effects because sometimes they are doing things that we believe or we think they are useful, but sometimes they do things that are not exactly what we expect. And sometimes we ask them to do things that are actually conflicting because ourselves have different objectives, different values that might be conflicting at the same time. So it's a very complex situation, and we shouldn't expect that they, on their own, just because they are autonomous, understand what this is about. So we need actually to consider that the design methodology that we use to develop those robots enables some alignment with our value. And I'm rather careful. I'm saying enables some alignment because they cannot be fully aligned. And this is where I need some water, sorry. So with human values, and human values, we'll get back to that, but just as an example, privacy, intimate life, autonomy, human autonomy, of course, dignity, etc., are human values that we need really to make sure that our machines do align with or do comply with to some extent, again, to some extent. So it's a design problem. It's a design problem, and it's called ethically aligned design because it's a process for designing those systems that should consider at design phase, which means in the beginning, day one, the effects of those robots on all direct and indirect stakeholders. Now, stakeholders is something that is a word that designate actually a lot of different categories of people. Again, I'll get back to that to be clearer. And this is, of course, contextual. It depends on the application. Where are you deploying the robot, with whom, etc. The stakeholders are going to be different. But we have also to consider that stakeholders are not just people who are directly impacted by the robot, using the robot. Because these are socio-technical objects, they impact society, they impact the environment as well. Because they are technical objects, they need to be developed, they use resources, they use computation, they are connected, etc., etc. So it's not just your robot at home doing something. We have to consider these effects with a perspective that they can be at short and long terms, they can have local and global effects, and they can have some cumulative effects, very long-term effects, because again, they interact with people. So they shape the way we think, they shape the way we believe we interact with machines, especially, for example, if you start with children. And therefore, it's a long-term effect on human society. So really, this is an issue that requires consideration, and this consideration is on the shoulders of the designers who develop those systems. Sustainability, I wanted to mention it explicitly here because we are using more and more computations, specifically when you use, for example, large language models, generative AI systems, etc. And these systems have a very high level of energy consumption, which means emissions in some cases, but it's energy anyway. You have to produce energy. You have to develop plants to produce energy. They consume water because they need to be refrigerated in not the robots themselves, but the farms where you have the computation going on, and the all the data that is in the warehouse, data warehouse, the word I was looking for. So this has to be considered as well. So this ethically aligned design process is a reflection process, we think, which is based on ethical principles and theories. It doesn't mean you have to be a specialist in deontic Kantian ethics, or in consequentialism, or in Rawlsian, or in virtue ethics, or in Ubuntu ethics. It means that you have to reflect on the ethical values. You have to reflect on the ethical values, and you can be helped by those theories. And it requires, basically, what the issue is going to be about is to analyze human values that are at stake, and prioritize those values related to context. It's not just a general discourse. So this is a very simple summary of this process. When you start a project, first question the objective of this project. Why am I doing this? Why am I developing this robot? Why am I developing this application? Usually, asking this question will lead you to really understand what's the purpose. Why are you doing this? It's not just because, well, it's funny. No, you have to ask this question profoundly. Why am I doing this? To get out of the context of social robots, why are we building automated cars? Okay, so if you ask a company who builds automated cars, why are doing this? They will answer to save lives. This is not correct. You can read a lot of statistics about car accidents, and see how car accidents are provoked by people, but mostly provoked by situations worldwide. It's not necessarily by removing the human factor that you are going to drastically reduce accidents. So the purpose of the project is important. And in our case, what is the need? Why do we want to develop social robots? In which conditions, which context, for which use? What are the benefits? These are first questions to be asked. And who are the benefactors? Who are going to benefit from that? Second question is about the ecosystem. Who are the stakeholders, the individuals, the groups, society at large, the environment? But you have to detail who are those individuals, who are those groups, what are their values? Are there, sorry for the typo, are there any ethical risks involved in developing and deploying this project? Then you go to value analysis. This is where moral theories come into play, and you start to analyze the values, the components of your values. I'm going to give you an example. And values usually will come with tensions between them, with conflicts between them, because we need things that are conflicting. We need, for example, complete freedom, but we need complete safety. Well, you have to give up some of your safety requirements to have more freedom, and vice versa. You, for example, you want to a lot of freedom in traveling by car. Well, you know that you risk a car accident. So safety and freedom are conflicting. Priorities are different for each stakeholder, and therefore during the design phase, during the development phase, deployment phase, use phase, different stakeholders are involved, sometimes the same. They don't have the same values. They don't have the same priorities at each level. So this has to be also analyzed. And only then, after reflecting on all this, you come up with your design of the system that has to comply with the result of your analysis, so that the robot has the design, not speaking about just physical design, of course, the software design, etc., that solves at best the issues at stake. So let's look at a use case, which is social robots for care, and I'm going to focus later on elderly care. So first question, why? Why do we develop care robots for care? Usually, those who want to do that will announce benefits and will announce solutions to problems. So, for example, why do develop such robots? Well, we don't have enough human personnel. We don't have enough human personnel. Is this the end of the story? Why don't you hire more people? Well, we don't have more people because we are a society that has get aged, and we don't have young people. Why don't you authorize immigration? Well, no answer. Or why is there a problem inside your countries about aging society? Why people young people don't just breed and make children? What's the problem? Are they well paid? Well, so you see, when you start questioning this simple answer, you start asking very general questions, which are not just technical questions. They are policy questions. They are society questions. And these are important because the way we build technology is going to shape our societies. So we have to, not only the right, but we have the duty to question the reason why we develop this technology. Another reason might be to reduce the physical and emotional demand on care personnel. So for example, here, of course, it's much easier to have a machine that can hold people than to hold people yourself. But do you hold people actually? Well, you don't. Sometimes you do because, for example, some people who stay in bed for a long time because they are sick need to be, rolled to avoid scars, I think you call that. So you need some energy, some effort, but maybe 2 people can do it. Well, we don't have enough people. Then maybe you need, in hospitals, for example, robots to move objects. We have seen this morning that this is not really a need that the personnel wants, but you can develop such a machine. You can develop those machines for specific benefits of some persons, the final users. For example, a person who is handicapped or an elderly person can be fed by a machine like that. And this, of course, will enable the care personnel to do something else at the same time, take care of other people. But again, the question is, does this person really want to be fed this way? Maybe if they feel that they are more autonomous by doing this. Maybe not. We have to find out before coming in and deploying this machine to the person. Maybe they want it, maybe they don't. And they can be used for providing information, for entertainment, a lot of things. So this, just by questioning why, you have a lot of issues to address and sometimes some decision to make. So let's look in this use case of elderly homes, and I'm using here the word homes for your personal home, but also for the homes where people go to spend the final years of their lives. Who are the stakeholders? Well, this is a list. Maybe it isn't even complete, but of course, the first impacted people are those persons for whom you develop the robot, which is a group of elderly persons at home or in the homes. You have here 3 different examples of that, and down there it's a project in the Netherlands that was developing this robot called Alice to be deployed in your personal home, and basically being a kind of conversational agent, because it wasn't able to do anything else. So it's connected, and you can it can provide information or interact with people. But there are other persons in the homes. Other persons, I'm speaking about those elderly persons as well, for whom the robots are not necessarily deployed. So some people are going to use them, some are not, but they are impacted because they are present at the same time. So we have to reflect on the consequence of some people using those machines and some not using them. The robots are not necessarily provided by the home. They might be property of the person who comes in and wanted to be with them. So does this impact the others? The third category of stakeholder is the care personnel, who's going to actually get these from their boxes, plug them, put them, launch them, and put them to perform whatever they have to perform in terms of interaction with the persons. And this personnel has, of course, a major role to play. I think Anne-Sophie can mention a lot about this. The families who come and visit, the caretakers is not professional, but those who take care of people, visitors, like larger family, friends, etc. Don't forget that you need also technical maintenance personnel because they break down. The robot provider, they have their responsibility. They have to be part of those stakeholders that you think about, and they have not only their responsibility, but it's a product they sell. So they have specific interest in being sure that this system is working properly, and they have some responsibility. Also, maybe they are paid by Social Security, which means it's a society problem. How many such robots can society afford, and for whom becomes a very general question, which is not just a local decision to be made by such or such hospital. So there are a lot of stakeholders, and each stakeholder has values that they would like to promote, and therefore we have to look at those values. Now, I'm mixing everything here. I took several things depending on whose values they are, because I'm not having any time to develop this more thoroughly. But in terms of values, you ask the question, what are, for these different stakeholders, the thing that they care for in terms of values? Well, dignity is, of course, at least in our culture, on top, because human dignity is the basic value from which a lot of things stem. This is why it's in the European Charter of Human Rights. This is why it's in the Council of Europe Charter. This is why it's in several constitutions. Human dignity is a very important value, which is a complex one. It decomposes in different things. Not many people can just summarize what human dignity is, but in one sentence, it's your intrinsic worth as a human, whatever this means, right? Because when you say your intrinsic worth, it means you cannot attempt on the dignity of a person by doing a lot of things. Some of those things is attempting on its autonomy, its ability to make decisions on its own, on their own, sorry. Their agency, capacity to act and to decide, capacity to have an oversight about what they are, how they are being treated, and also about the machine they are using. Now we have some risks, for example, of when you deploy robots such as Paro or other robots, of infantilization and also deception, because we are going to naturally attribute capacities to the robots, emotions, even intelligence, and we are going to attribute to them the capacity to understand us, whereas they don't. Should we as specialists tell them that this is not correct? You should not fall in this trap. It's unavoidable, but try to not fall in this trap, or just let them live their lives and be happy with playing with a robot or interacting with a robot and thinking that the robot understands them. That's not an easy point. Freedom, safety, and robustness of the system, safety of people, robustness of the system, they are related, because if the system is not robust, safety is at stake. Security in terms of protection of data, protection of against any hacking, for example. Imagine you have a robot in a hospital, it has been hacked, so it does things. It's not just about data, it does things because it's action. It does things that are not expected to do. Privacy, because it collects a lot of data. How do you protect privacy? There are legal constraints, of course, but not always clear. Would you ask a person who has a very high cognitive deficiency if they consent on using a robot? It's going to be difficult to say that they have informed consent. So how do you decide for them? Well, we have to put in place some procedures for that. It exists for other things. Transparency about what the system does and explanation about its behavior. Fairness, accessibility, inclusion, cost. Costs typically is something that between a customer who wants to pay the least cost possible and a vendor who wants to benefit from selling the product is a conflicting value here. Emotional well-being of people. Experiments show, for example, that communication with a robot improves emotional well-being of people because it's very gaming. Environmental well-being, individual well-being, social well-being, care personnel well-being, and workload. We want to reduce it. Accountability, who's accountable is something if something breaks down. Well, how do you trace that? All these are questions. I see that time is ending, so I'm going to conclude. I'm not going to develop this. It has been a lot developed this morning, actually, with different talks about what robot capacities are and how using these capacities might is impacted by developing these capacities. So I'm going to conclude now. And the good news is that what I presented is largely related to something which is a standard. It's a standard that has been developed by the IEEE Global Initiative on Ethics of Autonomous and Intelligent Systems. It's called P7000 in IEEE terms, but it has been also adopted by ISO, IEC, and this is the number of the standard. It's called Model Process for Addressing Ethical Concerns During System Design. One of the main contributor to this is Sarah Spiekerman, who is professor at University of Vienna. This scheme shows the basic approach, the basic process that you follow that I have summarized during my talk to arrive to a more or less ethically aligned designed robot. Thank you. I'll stop here.
Question from students, maybe we can start with them.
Yeah.
There was none yet, so go
ahead. Thank you for the great talk. Super interesting. Could you please develop a little bit about the conflicting aspects. So we know that sometimes when we design, I mean, we have either the same stakeholder has conflicting aspects, or if we have collaboration among different stakeholders, they have like a company or a user or etc. So how do we prioritize this?
Well, this is where moral theories come into stake. I mean, you have you can have an approach. In my opinion, it should be a mix, of course, but you can have an approach. Well, you have to identify first the. Let me take an example. You have to identify that, for example, privacy and safety might conflict. Because you need to acquire data, and this is something that is not good for privacy, and but the data is good for safety because you are going to use it to do something. So how much data are you going to be able to collect, and how do you, the answer is how much data, how to minimize data. Notice that this is already something in the GDPR. You don't have to how to minimize data. So first question, do I really need this data? Second question, so you see, this is the analysis. Do I really need this data? How much data? If you have a kind of consequentialist approach, you could say there are risks and benefits. Let me compare risks and benefits, and I will decide for a solution that is a min-max. Actually, I will going to minimize risks and maximize benefits. So it's case by case, of course, to do that. You can have a more systematic or deontic approach, saying such or such data I don't have the right to collect. I have to find another way to solve the problem, if any, avoiding collecting this data. I know I don't need I don't know, for example, the ethnicity of the person. I just need some indicator if they are going to be subject to such or such disease. So it's not about the ethnicity of the person. So the prioritization of values is really analyzing in detail those conflicts, trying to have, well, whatever approach you want to adopt, and a mix of approaches, and finally finding a solution that is the most acceptable to solve the problem. If the problem actually, again, has to be questioned from the beginning. Yeah, but so it's really contextual. So you have a process, but the process requires real development in a specific case.
Well, thank you. Extremely useful content. The premise of your talk is we need to do that at design stage. And there is more, well, there's quite a bit of research showing that when you put a robot next to a human, there is this mutual shaping, to take the expression of Selma, about like the fact that we learn to know each other and we change our behaviors in reaction to the other. How do you think this should impact your model? Because in some sense we could say we should reconsider the whole framework every so often, right?
You're totally right, and sorry, I said at design stage. I meant, and in the scheme it was shown at all stages, but start at design stage. I mean, don't wait until the end to say, oh, by the way, let's do some ethics now that the robot is built and the project is over. No, you have to start at design stage, but it's a cycle. I agree totally with you. At all stages, you have to consider your solutions, because maybe developing your solutions will also put a lot of stress on your company, and you might go bankrupt. So you are also a stakeholder in this process. You have to decide what you can do, what you cannot do to produce the product. You are also a stakeholder. But still, at deployment, you have to analyze if your solutions were actually operational and comply with what you wanted, and revise your design. So if you have taken care of this since the beginning, you should have the ability to better go into this cycle. And after deployment, you need to also have an ethical impact assessment. What will result when I deploy the robot? What happened in this place? Are the final users satisfied? Did I do something wrong? And again, you have to revise your design. But having this cycle is very important for the company who developed the system, the final users, and basically for the whole process.
Maybe if we have one other question, otherwise, yes, okay, we have no other questions.
Sure. Okay. A second question is about values in cross-cultural settings. So how could you please analyze and say how, I mean, it's a problem that I face all the time.
Yes, that's a very important point. The point of are values universal? And of course, yes. The answer, in my opinion, I'm not the only one, but some people think differently. The answer is yes. But sometimes we give more importance to some values in some contexts, in some regions, in some culture. But what we can notice is that you have 192 countries who are members of the United Nations who have agreed upon the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It doesn't mean they are applying it. But they agree on what it states in terms of rights, and rights are related to values. It starts by dignity, actually. All humans are born equal in dignity and rights. That's the beginning. So I think that values are universal. What is not universal is the way we solve the issues when there are conflicts between the values. And some context makes us do things that prioritize some values over others. So in my opinion, values are universal. The solutions are contextual or cultural, and then we can be in agreement or not between each other, I mean, between different people. But at this time, we had a lot of wars. We will have more because we don't have the same priorities, but we have the same values. Because when you justify your acts, you always say, I'm respecting the values. So.
So let's thank Raja again. All right, so we have the pleasure of hosting Mihalis Kritikos, who is an AI and ethics expert at the European Commission. And on top of being, let's say, a regular scientific contributor and lecturer at several UK universities, he has also contributed to several texts or like regulatory text. I don't know this word, right? So he will explain better than me. That ended up being part of resolutions in the EU Parliament. So we are very happy to be here and to listen to your opinion and your point of view on this topic. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Can I say a few words about what we do, but about me, and then I'll try to get into the presentation. Can I share my presentation? Is it possible? Okay, I can do that. So I'll say a few things and then I'll upload the presentation. As Javier said, and thank you for the invitation, and apologies again for not being able to be with you. I will try to be as interactive and as, let's say, open to questions and discussion later on as possible, despite the distance. I'm working for the ethics sector, the ethics and research integrity sector of the European Commission. We are based at the DGRTD, the DG which is responsible, the service of the Commission which is responsible for funding research and innovation. And I'm going to also explain to you how we are doing on a daily basis almost with regard to ethics and especially ethics of AI. Before that, and as Javier has mentioned, I used to work for the Scientific Foresight Unit of the European Parliament. So my previous life was spent mostly on the legislative side, and there we were kind of working on my work was focused on anticipating legal and ethical challenges and trying to somehow provide input into the work of the parliament on its efforts to regulate, to control new and emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence, blockchain, and other similar disruptive technologies. I used to be an academic as well, and by that I'm trying to say that I happen to have been in both sides of the Brussels River. So from the side of the Commission, which is basically there to initiate legislation and to somehow guarantee the uniform application of norms, also ethics norms, but also on the other side of one of the co-legislators, the European Parliament, that at that moment I was there, and I'm going to explain that I was part of the drafting team for the first ever resolution of the European Parliament in the field of robotics back in 2017. So I'll start my presentation. I'll try to hopefully, let's see, and you tell me if it's uploaded. Can you see it? Okay, good. I'll try to provide you. I don't know if you had the chance to discuss the efforts of the European Union to regulate artificial intelligence, to somehow put forward a set of rules in order to make sure that innovation in that field is occurring, is happening in a responsible way. But I'll try to briefly summarize the work of the Commission, at least of all institutions, in a couple of minutes. The basic, when it comes to AI, when it comes to artificial intelligence, the basic, let's say, pillars of the work of the Commission are four. The one is focused on the ethics part, the ethics guidelines and the ethics requirements. I'm going to focus my presentation there because that's what we do. There is a proposal, and there are two proposals, legislative proposals right now in that field, on the AI Liability Directive and another one on the famous AI Act. If we have the time, I'll try to, and I'll dedicate for sure a couple of sentences on the AI Act. And there is also another parallel effort on the so-called coordinated plan on AI. That is an initiative that belongs both to the European Commission and the member states in trying to provide an overall framework for the, let's say, funding, the support of innovation, but also on ways to introduce safeguards, ethical and legal safeguards, so as to prevent and mitigate potential risks. So the Commission and the Union has put forward the so-called trustworthy approach to AI. You may find it labeled as human-centric. You may find it labeled as ethical AI. In essence, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about the need to design and deploy the technology in a way that is, let's say, ethically sound. And this is happening on three different levels. We have the level of ethics. As I said, this is our work. So we had the ethics guidelines that I'm going to talk about, produced by the high-level expert group. We had the Altai list, a much more applicable approach to AI ethics, again produced by the same group. And our work is focusing on the so-called operationalization of these principles, the high-level principles, into the domain of research and innovation. So that is the ethical governance side. We have the legal side, where again ethics is very evident. In the latest version of the AI Act, the human rights impact assessment for high-risk applications is on the table. Again, very strong wording, a very strong tool to prevent and mitigate any potential risk upon the enjoyment of human rights in Europe. And also there is a focus on the protection of fundamental rights. The AI Act has this type of, it can be seen as an instrument of innovation, of internal market, but also it's an instrument, and that's what most institutions are looking at. It's an instrument for protecting human rights. And there, at the third level, we have the standardization efforts by CEN-CENELEC. There are, it's a standardization body funded by the EU that is trying also to somehow standardize ethical ways of approaching AIs. And by that I mean they are trying to come up with standards on bias, on competence requirements for AI ethicists, and for the so-called artificial intelligence trustworthiness characterization. Having said that, CEN-CENELEC, and if we have the time, I can come back to that, is not the only player in the field of standardization. As you may know, we have the IEEE, we have other ISO and other organizations operating in that environment, and their work is also worth being discussed. Now, with regard to AI Act and looking at it from an ethical perspective, we're looking at it as an ally, as an ethical ally, simply because it is there to mitigate the harmful use of AI. It tries to, its main scope is to facilitate the so-called transparent and ethical use of AI. It's trying to promote the so-called human on the loop approach. There are very many instruments, there are many provisions that somehow appear as reinforcing and strengthening the enforcement part by imposing fines and by imposing strict sets of obligations on both providers and deployers of AI systems. The AI Act, I don't want to spend more time, I can come back to that. For those ones that they don't know the whole process, it came out as a proposal of the Commission on the 21st of April 2021, and it follows the so-called risk approach. It divides risks, it classifies risks into four different categories, from no risk to high, to forbidden practices, basically, to areas where AI is not allowed to be designed or deployed. And it is currently under negotiation. There was an agreement last week by the member states, at the Council formation, at the COREPER formation. We're waiting for also the two parliament committees that are responsible for that, the ITRE committee and the LIBE committee, gave their green light. We're expecting to see the final text being adopted at the plenary level, most probably at the last meeting of that European Parliament in April. But as I said, I'll come back to that. My entire focus is on the so-called trustworthy approach to AI, which basically means AI which is lawful, respects all applicable laws and regulations, ethical, respecting ethical principles and values, and robust. So from a technical perspective, to be, let's say, to follow the principles of data integrity, to be cyber secure, and to make sure that the system, it works in accordance to the technical specifications. These are the ethical guidelines for trustworthy AI. This is a work of a high-level expert group composed of 52 experts that the Commission set up a few years ago, and they came up with these so-called 7 core requirements: human agency and oversight, technical robustness, privacy, transparency, diversity, environmental well-being, accountability. For this group, and I kind of followed partially the work of this group, these are the most important, let's say, elements that need the most important somehow issues that need to be looked at, and for any upcoming regulatory initiative, the focus should be to protect these issues and to take care of these challenges. I don't need, I suppose, to go through them. Human agency and oversight refers to the need for humans to be in control of whole process, which is something very important in the field of robotics. And I remember the discussions back then in the parliament about the need to have a switch off, switch on human in the loop approach. Technical robustness, we refer to that. Privacy, again, it's a very dominant issue in the probably overshadows the whole discussion on AI. AI being a very kind of data-intensive technology. Transparency, that refers mostly to the black box effect of the algorithmic decision-making systems and to the ways we can, let's say, shed light on the operation of the system, on the logic of the system. Diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness, again, refers to algorithms and how we can train algorithmic data in order for the algorithms to be fair and to reflect diversity. The environmental aspect is something which the Commission now trying to pick up. For some years it was rather hidden. It was an issue that there was not so much policy attention. Right now there are, and I can refer to them, several initiatives that point to the need to measure the environmental footprint of these systems and to see whether, for me, AI is a perfect example of the so-called dual transition. How you can achieve digital transition, you can achieve the objectives of the so-called digital innovation, but at the same time meet the goals of the so-called Green Deal. So how you can have just ecological, green, and digital transition at the same time. And accountability, by that it's mostly a legal discussion on the liability framework that needs to be in place in order to find out who is going to be held accountable if something goes wrong. As I said, the guidelines were followed by was the first type of deliverable by that group. There were 4 deliverables. Another one, which is also very let's say useful for our work, is the so-called Altai list. The group didn't only produce high-level principles and requirements, they also made kind of the extra mile and produced an assessment list, which is basically a self-assessment list for designers and deployers of AI systems, which is basically a set of questions that these actors need to ask themselves in order to find out whether what they are designing, what they have in mind, what they have on paper is ethically sound. I'll try to skip that because I want to show you the slide that refers to our process before I get, and I don't want to get you into the technical details. So this is what we do. We're responsible for the ethics appraisal process. It's a corporate process, so it's applicable to all funding instruments at the EU level. So basically, we're there to safeguard that any research funded at the EU level respects ethical principles and fundamental values, the way they have been framed at the Charter of Fundamental Rights, the way they have been framed by the high-level expert group, the way they have been somehow shaped by the European treaties. This is a very, I would say, detailed process. It starts, our work starts when scientific proposals, it may be an individual Marie Curie fellowship, it may be a huge grant with a consortium of 20 partners from industry and from academia. Our work starts when these proposals have been pre-selected on the basis of the scientific merit. So we only look at these proposals. Then we start the pre-screening. So that's an internal procedure. We try to find out whether a proposal raises ethical issues. If we find out that there are ethical issues, that goes to screening, which is performed by 2 external experts. And then if we see that the issues are that serious or that complex, then it goes to the so-called ethics assessment. It comes to basically the whole process has been decentralized. So the pre-screening and screening is done by mostly the so-called executive agencies, the research agencies of the Commission, REA, ERC, CINEA. There are different kinds of bodies for different types of research. So the serious and complex issues come to us for assessments, and this is not done by us personally. We set up expert panels of experts on ethics issues. They don't have to be professional ethicists, and if we have the time, I'll come back to that. These are multidisciplinary panels composed of lawyers, technologists, sociologists, philosophers, people that come together and discuss the ethical challenges, the ethical issues that this project may raise. They are drafting a panel report that goes to the applicant or to the beneficiary if the research is ongoing, and he has the contractual obligation. They become basically contractual requirements. So the applicant needs to meet to kind of follow what they say, the experts say, and this sometimes takes the form of an ethics deliverable. And I saw that in your project you had some of them as well. Once for years we were only performing ethics ex-ante ethics screenings and assessments. Throughout the last few years, we developed a methodology for performing the so-called ex-post ethics assessments, and by that we mean ethics audits. So during the implementation of the project, we stop the project for after the first year, after the second year, and then we also set up a panel and that looks at this project. Having said that, as I said, this is applicable to all the whole EU ecosystem, research ecosystem, including the executive agencies, including the so-called joint undertakings. So it's a process that applies across the board, and we are there as a central kind of service to guarantee the uniform application and the methodological, let's say, consistency of this process. I'll go back just to show you that for AI activities, after what we don't do when it comes to the 7 ethics requirements of the high-level expert group, the only thing we don't look at is the so-called technical robustness. So our experts, the ethics experts, look at the other 6, let's say, ethics requirements. The technical robustness is assessed at the level of the scientific evaluation. That is an internal kind of division of work. And I also have to mention and highlight that for all activities that involve the development, deployment, and use of AI-based systems, all these projects go directly to ethics assessment. So for the time being, simply because we still don't have, we're all learning, as we say, when it comes to this technology. We prefer to take a kind of more precautious approach, and we want to see all projects involving AI as in the form of an ethics assessment panel, and for that we set up this panel in order to perform this work. And there are specific, let's say, sections in our forms when it comes to artificial intelligence. There are questions that you can see, the specific questions that we ask the applicants to answer, whether the activity includes the necessary elements to prevent, mitigate the risks of human rights infringements, discrimination against people, negative social impacts, and depending on the answers we receive by the applicants, it's we decide, the panel decides whether to clear, as we say, to provide ethics clearance, or to ask for a second assessment, to ask for the applicant to do some extra legwork in order to demonstrate the ethical soundness of the project. I would say, and if we have the time, I'll come back to the specificities of the process. It's a complex job, because we're talking about the new technology, and there are many definitional and other, I would say, ambiguities that do not make our life easier. So in that sense, I want to take the opportunity to say that projects like yours are only expected to help us. We're kind of counting on this project. We're relying on the deliverables of these projects in order to be given, to have one more, let's say, methodological guidance, to have one more set of tools in our hands in order to test it in our procedures and see whether that can facilitate the work of the ethics assessment. These are some standard requirements I picked up from our reports that usually panels put forward in their final report about the human rights impact assessment, about the need for a detailed explanation of the measures, details that are asked by the applicants or by the beneficiaries of projects in order for the panel to be satisfied and for us as a funder to kind of safeguard that public money is well spent, and these projects and this technology is not going to go out of control. I summarized some of these requirements. We can discuss. We can go back to this at any point. Right now, what I would like to focus mostly is on the work we are doing to operationalize these high-level principles. We have the Altai list, yes, but for our procedures, we decided that we needed much more, I would say, tailor-made guidance framework. And our first attempt to shape such a framework was the guidelines we produced on the ethics by design for AI. Basically, that was the outcome of 3 flagship projects we funded back in 2015, 16, 17, 18. And this expert came up with a methodology about the so-called ethics by design methodology, and that took the shape of a guidance that is publicly available. It's a reference document for Horizon Europe. And I think it's a document that is worth mentioning, worth highlighting, and also we see that there is a lot of the applicability of this document is quite high. This document includes principles and requirements, includes practical steps for applying the ethics by design approach in the development, the deployment, and the use of AI. I can come back to that if needed again. Now, what we're preparing right now, we are in the process of preparing. I don't want to label it as guidance note. It can be a toolbox. It can be a guidance framework on algorithmic bias. Another one on informed consent in the field of AI. We are developing a methodology on AI ethics audits, and another one on the so-called project lifecycle and AI. And actually, I have to mention that there is a 5th one that I didn't put in the slides on human rights impact assessment. So we're trying to prepare our selves and our services for once the AI Act is there, to also try to see how we can, make sure that the researchers, the research community, or the innovation community has some what we call a moral, a manual, an ethics manual in their hands, in order when they see the principles, when they see the trustworthy approach, not to be panicked, not to be surprised, but instead to go through these documents that are not legally binding. They can ignore this advice, but the advice is there, the guidance is there for them to know what they need to write and how they need to reflect when it comes to projects of this kind. Having said that, EU, is I'm biased, but I'm not biased in saying that I'm biased because I'm working for the institutions, but I'm not biased in terms of saying that the EU has been a pioneer in the field of the so-called ethics of AI. It's going to be the first legal order in adopting a legislation of this kind probably in the world. But at the same time, we're not the only ones, the only part of the planet that is active in that field. Actually, there are many international initiatives, parallel initiatives at the level of UNESCO with the recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence, a very important kind of initiative. OECD was the first, actually, international organization that came up with the principles that actually were endorsed by G7. The Council of Europe is right now framing the so-called Framework Convention on Artificial Intelligence, Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law. And we have more sectorial bodies of the UN that are also working on trying to identify the ethical challenges, but also provide a roadmap and a way to tackle this, to address these challenges. And that I'm referring to UNICEF and the WHO. There are other initiatives taken. There are actually, the other day I was reading, there was a mapping of these ethics initiatives in the field of AI, and there are more than 240 of this kind at the level of universities, the level of companies, the level of governments. There are different ones, and there, of course, the question and the discussion is about whether this kind of fragmented landscape is a good thing or a bad thing. We can discuss that if there is time. I thought of adding, and I did, a couple of slides on the work of the European Parliament. Not only because the Parliament, being a co-legislator, is the one that has put a very, I would say, strong. It has managed to impose, in a way, its own narrative on the AI Act, and which of added value, especially when it comes to ethics and human rights. But also because I happened to work there for 6 years, and I saw the discussion on AI and the robotics, and starting back in 2015. And Raya was there as well. We had it was the first report, the Delvaux report, on the civil law rules on AI, and we organized hearings, public hearings. There were all sorts of, it was a new item of policy attention at that moment, a very new one. And I have to say that I have to kind of make reference to the rapporteur of that report, simply because she, instead of limiting herself to drafting a civil proposal for a civil law framework, she broadened the scope of the exercise. And for that, that is the reason why this report, the one you have on the slide, the 2017, the Delvaux report, as we call it in the Parliament, includes issues such as ethics, intellectual property, standardization, oversight, and the whole. There are actually two codes. There is a Magna Carta for ethics. That's how we labeled it at that moment, where it contains a code of conduct for robotics scientists and a code of conduct for research ethics committees. So it was a first attempt to kind of not preempt, but map the territory and find ways, in creative ways, to raise these issues. That report was followed by another report a couple of years later by a Conservative MEP, Ashley Fox, that was again focused on the European industrial policy. But if you read the report, most of it is focused on the ethics of AI, and includes very, I would say, quite innovative ideas about how the ethics governance of AI should be designed. Again, that was for these two reports that I happened to be involved, were the first type of mental exercises and institutional exercises to find out what is behind, the so-called cyber-physical systems. That's how it was. Robots were labeled at that moment, at least internally, at the Parliament level, and then that was expanded to cover AI, machine learning, and other similar concepts. I also was involved in the study that was commissioned by the European Parliament Legal Affairs Committee on the European to support the resolution, and there we managed to take stock of the work that was done in the field of ethics of robotics, and the report, the studies. For those of you that haven't gone through that, is I think quite a good attempt to raise again awareness, ethics awareness in the field of robotics. I'll stop here, and I'll open the floor for questions. On any of these issues I tried to raise during that presentation.
Thanks, Mihalis. So
Thank
I
you.
think we will have time for one question, and you will need to tell me so I can repeat it to Mihalis.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. So you mentioned that the European Commission has started to focus more on the environmental impact of AI. So what are the measures taken by the European Commission to increase transparency relating to the environmental impact of AI? Because we know that greenwashing, it's a real issue. And also a lot of papers that are published, and blogs, they don't really give us the metrics which can be used to realistically estimate the impact of AI services. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. Very important one. The work is at its infancy. I cannot claim that we have progressed enough. In our service, we are now drafting guidelines of the application of the so-called do no harm principle in the field of environmental research with a focus on AI. So we're trying to find out ways to measure the environmental impact of AI from an ethics perspective, and ways to trigger the ways to force I hate this word, but the ways to push the researchers to think about the environmental cost of what of AI scientists to measure the work of the environmental cost of their work, but zooming out of that kind of rather minor initiative at the institutional level, what I see as another attempt to address the issue of the environmental dimension of AI is the work of the Commission on the so-called green data centers. As you know, data centers are the powerhouse of AI algorithmic decision-making systems. There is a lot of algorithmic training taking place there and data processing. So there is an attempt for the EU to push for CO2 neutral data centers, and data centers being another, I would say, source of environmental pollution and energy, very energy intensive as well. The Commission is trying to somehow provide incentives for the new generation of data centers to be built in a way that is environmentally sound. I haven't seen, there are probably initiatives within DG Connect and DG Environment on this issue, but right now there is nothing horizontal, but to me it's very important. The environmental aspect, the sustainability aspect is one of the 7 ethics requirements. So environment is recognized, is labeled as an ethics issue, and to me that is to us that is extremely important. So since it is there, we need to do something about that before it is too late. And the figures show that the more we move towards generative AI systems, the more energy intensive this work becomes, the AI world becomes, and that is something which is in a period of time and in a continent that suffers from energy in terms of energy resources and is desperate to find ways to be energy sustainable. We need to also take account, instead of only talking about innovating and pushing AI towards different directions, you have to also take a step back and start looking at how sustainable this technology is, and whether, by promoting AI, we may and promoting digital transition through AI, we may not meet the requirements of the Green Deal, which is another major pillar in the Commission policies.
All right. Thanks, Mihalis, for the answer. Thanks for the presentation, for being here with us. In the interest of time, we have to move on to the next speaker. But I think we can thank you once more for being here.
Thank you.
So our next speaker is Professor Anne-Sophie Rigaud from Assistance Publique Hôpitaux de Paris. So he's a professor of gerontology, and she's also the director of the Broca Hospital, if I'm not mistaken. And she's here to tell us about all these ethical aspects in the framework of the SPRING project. So thanks for being here.
Thank you very much. In this presentation, I will shortly explain why we are interested in robots as a medical hospital, as a geriatric hospital, and then I will speak about all the ethical files and the regulations files which were asked for the project. And then very shortly, I will give you some main concerns of stakeholders in the SPRING project about the robot and the use of a robot. So, we are interested in robots and technologies for older adults because we're a geriatric hospital, so we welcome people, older adults with all kinds of disease, and among these we welcome people with Alzheimer's disease and other disease related to Alzheimer. And we, of course, we care them, and we have a research unit which one part is dedicated to diagnosis and early markers of a disease, other to the medical and pharmacological treatment, and then to non-pharmacologic treatment and care. And 15 years ago, people told us that, well, technology is coming here. You're doing cognitive stimulation. You are doing caring for the families, for the patients. But you have to take into account technology, and you have to take care of the needs and preference of the people, and try to contribute to tailor this technology to the people, to the older adults, to the vulnerable people and the families. That's the reason why we decided to contribute to this large community of engineers, end users, psychologists who try to contribute to tailor technologies to the needs and preference of vulnerable people, older people, or children. And so that's the reason why we work in this field. So we work in Broca, and I'm not the only one, and I would like to emphasize the presence of Lauriane Blavet, who works very well in this project, in the Spring project, and was doing a PhD in this field. So what is our role in the Spring project? We have a Harry robot, which fortunately is a robot which is liked by the patients and families because it has a human face. And the role in this project and the objective is to evaluate under control and real condition a set of use case in the context of a geriatric hospital. Unfortunately, maybe we were not able to really have medical use cases, but probably it's better to begin with use cases which are aside from medical use cases. And maybe medical use cases are not the best, but anyway, we choose to we chose some use cases which seem very relevant for people, professionals, older adults, professionals, and families. Which is the robot provides a reception and welcoming to the hospital users. The robot delivers information and reminders on preventive hygiene measures, such as COVID, of course. The robot provides assistance to patients throughout the care process, how to go from one place to another. The robot provides orientation and guidance related to the hospital services. For example, it might be a bit difficult to go from one place to another one, and especially in some places, the robot can be very useful. The robot provides entertainment activities for persons who attend the hospital. This may be very useful, for example, when you suffer from a serious disease where you are in a waiting room, and often people said that it reduces the anxiety to be having activities with a robot while waiting for the medical consultation. So these are the use cases which seems very relevant. They were proposed by, as I said, patients, group of patients, families and professionals. And this is the workflow of research. First, there was a sort of ethnographic research in the daycare hospital to see the context and see how it goes and what the people, both patients, families, and professionals were doing. Meanwhile, the robot was developed. The prototype of the robot was developed. The idea was to first to have a first estimation of acceptability and understand the organization of this daycare hospital. Then there was a study in the living lab. A living lab is a place where you can test technologies with healthy older adults, for example, and users before testing it in the real context, the real medical context. And here again, the idea was to study the robot with the interactions with the users and the robustness of the scenarios and the acceptability. And then where we are at the moment, at the end, the experimentation in real environment in the waiting room of the daycare hospital. And here was again to study the interaction between robot and end users, the acceptability, the usability, and something which we will do later, which is the organizational impact. When you introduce a technology in a certain context, of course, it changes the habits of people, and there are all kinds of constraints, and you have to evaluate and see how it can be implemented in such a context. And there will be also training of professionals in this domain. Okay, so in the context of a spring project, the idea, of course, was to design a set of guidelines to protect the participations and safeguard of the personal data during the spring experiments, and to ensure the compliance of spring partners with this framework. And the idea, of course, was to set of guidelines to ensure ethical compliance for all partners, and to follow up the actions taken by all of us during the project. So the European Commission asked for 3 deliverables. One was about really the human subjects, the procedure and criteria used to recruit participants, the informed consent procedures and forms, and the fact that we include vulnerable patients with cognitive impairment who are vulnerable, and thus we have to take into account this vulnerability in the project. The processing of personal data, of course, we have to justify, as Raja said before, which data are collected, and justify why these data are collected, and try to collect as few data as possible, and just for the reason for what is necessary. So information of procedure, consent procedure, forms for all data collection, storage, protection, retention, and destruction. And then all the privacy and ethics guidelines for all the projects. So in fact, we had in France to separate and ask to 2 committees. In France, we have 2 types of committees: a regional committee who is competent for giving approval for studies, mostly in presential with procedure. For example, you compare in presential 2 groups with a specific protocol, with no or very few ethical issues, and then you can ask a local committee. But if you want to, in fact, if you want to carry out study during which you may have you change the care of people, either by diagnosis or by treatment, you must ask to a national committee. And here we are in a gray zone when evaluating technology, because in fact here we do not change either diagnosis nor treatment, but most of the time the local committee think that they are not competent to give acceptance, approval for this type of project. In fact, this project including new technologies and are in a sort of gray zone, and they ask for national, we are asked to ask approval for the national committee. Unfortunately, this national committee are just at the beginning of this type of evaluation, and sometimes they don't know if they should say yes or no, and sometimes they say no. So they say yes. We were fortunate they said yes, but they didn't allow us to, unfortunately, put the robot in the waiting room as we had decided, expected, wanted before at the beginning, and we had. That is, we were not allowed to do the research with all the patients. We had to do the research in another waiting room, or in which the robot should be alone with the patients and the family, but not all the patients and not all the professionals in the waiting room. So this was a constraint that we couldn't that we had not foreseen, but which was important. So, however, for the GDPR things went okay. We had an approval for the data which were transferred to INRIA, and INRIA then transferred the data which were needed to each partner, so that each partner can have the data needed for the special type of work in the SPRING project. And what we did, but it is quite a constraint, because after each day of experiment, Lauriane has to check whether there are personal data which could identify the patient in the audio which has been recorded, remove this, send it to INRIA, and then erase the file, which is quite, as you may know, quite a lot of work. So finally, we were lucky in this project. We had all the acceptance. So so there were two phases, as I said. In the living lab study, which was the simulated environment, the idea was to to understand the determinants of the acceptance of a robot and to test the robot. We had different improvement of the robot. We had 3 phases, and we were able to test 55 persons and in different waves. And we had an improvement of the acceptance of a robot and the usability of a robot. In the first experiment, there were, as I told you, people in good health, older adults in good health, without cognitive impairment, who were volunteering to participate in the project, and professionals with different positions. Who also were volunteering to participate, of course. There are some constraints. We had to contact the people 2 weeks before the experiment, explain then all the experiment, verify that they agreed, send an information note, and the day of the experiment, again, we explain to them the project, make sure that they accept to participate, sign, of course, the consent form, and they had evaluation with both questionnaires and the very with scales which are used usually in this kind of projects, such as the system usability scale, the acceptability scale, interviews about ethical issues, and observation grids. And as I said, we transfer the data to INRIA, information note and consent form, which are always, of course, needed before any evaluation, any test for patients, for older adults. And then we had the second wave of the second group, the second study, sorry, in the daycare hospital, in real life environment. Again, the idea was to test with older adults and the family carers and professionals. Again, we had different ways. The engineers improve the robot, the functionalities of the robot across the project. Here, the patients were, the older adults were patients, which means that they had cognitive impairment. So that's the reason why they are, of course, vulnerable. And they might have a severe disorder, but they should be able to understand, of course, what is going on and the project and give their consent. Their families might also be vulnerable because they often are spouses, so they might also have cognitive impairment or at least other diseases which make them vulnerable people. And also the daycare professional who should not be vulnerable, but there is always the possibility that they might have a feeling that they are constrained, that they have to participate in the study, which might be a risk. But in fact, in the reality, either they accept, either they do not, and it's not really an issue. And again, we had the same protocol that in the living lab, which means we asked them 2 weeks before, and the day of the experiment, again, we remind them the project, ask them if they were, if they agree to participate, sign the informed consent and information and consent forms with the same protocol, with the scales within the interview. And so I wanted to say about the limits of the limits of let's say of a framework, because as I told you, we are still in a gray zone, which means that local or national committees are a bit not feeling at ease with this kind of projects, and there is a risk that they refuse this kind of project. Just to tell you quickly, I will go into. Just to tell you the main priorities of the main issues, ethical issues of the participants in the spring project. Rajat showed you a moment ago what all the ethical issues. Here was just the main issues in this project. They insisted in the risk of isolation and reduction of human care robots, and they insisted that robots should be supplementary and not, of course, be replace the professionals. They insisted about deception and manipulation possible. They said that the technology should be suitable for of course, for the patient. They spoke about excessive emotional attachment when the robot leaves, about privacy issues and security data and replacement of professionals. And professionals were aware and had a bit of concern about replacement of professionals by robots. And they also about increase of workload with the presence of the robot, because you have to prepare the robot and it might give more work, and of course the responsibility for use of robot. And to finish, I think some challenges. A very important thing is that robots should be tailored to the needs and preference of the users. This is always that the participants insist on, and try to manage to mitigate the psychological effects of a robot on vulnerable patients, such as deception and manipulation, ensure the privacy of users regarding personal data management, and boundaries between private and public. This was an important issue. People said that they were a bit concerned about speaking to the robots of private things and being heard by others. And the limitation, of course, of the organizational and psychological issues linked to the robot's presence. And I think we have also a lot of work to finish in informing the local and national committees about this new type of projects, of new technologies, in order to explain and explain then that, of course, there are very important ethical issues, but this should not avoid the carry out of this type of project, which are of course very important for all stakeholders. Thank you very much.
So we have time for a couple of questions.
Thank you very much for your talk. Do you okay? How did you define the fact that your the people with dementia, especially the people that had a very low MMSE, were consenting to the experiment? Because I know that in the fact when you have later stage dementia, it's very difficult to consent to anything. So how did you define that they were really consenting to what you were doing?
I think that, of course, this is a very important issue, and there are ways of evaluating if people can consent. For example, you can ask them to explain what they have understood and try to. For example, you explain what is going on, and then you try to ask them what they have understood, to make sure that they have understood. In practice, in daily life, in fact, it's not so difficult, because in fact, robots have an embodiment. In fact, the people will immediately tell you whether they want to interact or not with a robot. So, of course, what is difficult to explain is, for example, the transfer of data, which this might be difficult to explain. So this is why you have to make sure before that the transfer of your data is done properly and safely. But interacting with a robot, even if the people have very severe dementia, you immediately, in fact, you will understand whether they want to interact or not. And we knew that very early when we began to work with a robot which is called Paro. And in fact, we had people who were not able to speak anymore, or who were bedridden. And just at looking at the robot or not, you could understand whether they were interested or not. So this was, let's say, 13 years ago, we understood that people know and will tell you and will show you whether they're interested or not. But of course, in case there are people they have a legal guardian. Of course, we will ask to the family, of course, also.
Does this apply also to the data usage, in the sense that, so you said for the robot it's very easy, but for the data, how do you ask several times, oh, we are using your data, or do you just ask once, try to explain? How does it go?
In fact, at each time okay. you ask, each time you use a robot, you ask the people whether they want to use the robot, and you you explained about the data, but it would be explaining it would not be. I can't say that people with severe cognitive impairment have a real understanding of that. What data, the transfer of the data to in RIA and Israel or North Scotland. That's true. But I think this is our part to make sure that data are properly collected, stored, and used.
Okay, thank you very much.
Quick one. Oh God, then we should probably do it in the panel discussion if it needs to be quick. I just wondered, we have all these ethical hurdles and they are there for a reason. But can you see from your practice that we end up at some point in a situation where it's just unethical not to have robots because we may have so many workers shortages that we can't provide adequate care without using technology? Do you see that there will eventually be a shift in opinion in that sense, that we say, like, you know what, first and foremost, we need to get the right care to people. We need technology for that. I sense in some other areas we see a bit of an ethical shift to some extent, where we say, well, we have an ethical obligation also to help, and that trumps a lot of other ethical concerns. Do you see such a shift happening to some extent?
Yes, we had a shift, of course, with the COVID infection, because, for example, in France, people were clearly against robots, but even in our hospital. But when there was the COVID infection, of course, nobody could enter the hospital except the patients and the professionals during several months. And then everybody realized that they needed technology to be in contact with their families. So they accepted the robots. The robots were used to have video conference with families. And there was a shift. So this is what I think some kinds of events, unfortunately very sad as concerns COVID infection, can make a shift. And also the reality. For example, there are less in France. There are less and less nurses, less and less aid nurses, and you can always say, employ more nurses, employ more aid nurses. Nobody wants to go to the hospital, so it's just a reality. So I think those kinds of sad things, unfortunately, provide a shift.
Thanks, Anne-Sophie.